Okay, if you are on this page and watching this video, it is likely because you either clicked on an ad or someone sent you here. And this video version is above all the text down below, and you can certainly get a more thorough understanding of what's going on by reading all that text. But I'm going to do my best to give you the highlights of what it says. And obviously, if you're coming from YouTube or on your mobile phone, you're probably not as likely interested in scrolling and trying to read tiny text. So that's why I added this video to the top. So this is what it's all about. This is the first issue of the Infinite ROI Marketing Letter. I'm Kevin Hutto. I write the letter, and I'm just going to take a couple minutes here and actually share my screen and show you the sales letter for this and sort of hit the high points of what the sales letter says. And hopefully you will subscribe and get something from it. So without further ado, here's the letter. So obviously the title is the Infinite ROI Marketing Letter, real world from the trenches, no punches pulled, often politically incorrect, very often politically incorrect, always straight talking, insight into what's working now in the world of marketing and client getting for your business. So there's a lot of words there, a lot of periods of ellipses, and the point is that I've been doing this for a long time, 22, almost 23 years. In January of 2020 will be 23 years. And you're probably reading this letter or watching this video in 2019, late 2019. It is October right now. And if you're a marketer or a business owner and you've been running ads for a little while, you're probably noticing a shift that things aren't working quite the way they were a year ago, 2 years ago, et cetera. And everything is starting to, the margins are getting squeezed and things aren't working as well. So, you know, like I say in here, I hate to be the messenger because the messenger gets kicked into the hole and, you know, where he says, "This is Sparta." That was not my best imitation of Gerard Butler. But anyways, but the little guy, the people that are trying to run their own business and make a life for themselves are, you know, being conspired against by the big platforms, by the big corporations and competitors that are out there, and honestly by the political and social leanings of the world today. There's so much pissing, moaning, and complaining about the one percenters out there. And I don't know if they think that we're all Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, you know, living, or Michael Jackson living with unicorns and giraffes and monkeys. But ultimately, for the most part, what I've experienced is that the entrepreneurs out there are the ones who are working harder than everybody else. We're the ones that are employing people and keeping real jobs in America. And I'm not a political guy. As a matter of fact, I'm politically agnostic. I have a Trump hat back there, but it's more to trigger people so that I know that they don't need to be in my life than it is because of any support of any politician. I think they're all crooks. I think that, you know, you can't make it to that level without being a crook. So but just so I'm clear before I get any, you know, all this hate of politics stuff, the newsletter is not about politics. Politics will be in it because you can't operate a business today without understanding what's happening in the world, but it's not a political newsletter at all. But what it is I am interested in subscribers who are not interested in feeling guilty about trying to take care of their family and not interested in participating in the bull that is out there today saying that we are the ones that are the problems, because I think that we are actually the solution. We are the ones that are paying people's salaries. We are the ones that are paying the bulk of the taxes, as you're probably, if you're watching this, you're probably very aware. And realistically, you know, there's this whole group of people out there that are complaining, when ultimately it's the best time in the world to be alive. There is more opportunity today to make something of yourself than there ever has been in history. As a matter of fact, good grief, you can build a $1 billion business from nothing more than a great idea and some, probably hardcore execution. But you don't have to be, 150 years ago, if you wanted to build a $1 billion company, you had to start off with at least tens of millions, probably, because you had to buy ships, or you had to build a railroad, or mine oil, or create a steel factory or something. Whereas today, you can just be a regular guy and come up with an idea and start, Uber or Snapchat or Facebook or Google or any of those things, and you're like rich. But even beyond that, there's, that's fantastic, but you don't have to aspire to a $1 billion business. As a matter of fact, I don't, and I don't want it. But ultimately, there are great ways to build businesses anywhere from the hundreds of thousands to the low millions that will take care of you and your family, in a fantastic lifestyle and without a lot of hassle. And so basically what I'm doing with this newsletter is I've been able to do this for 22 years, and it's going to be an insider look at my businesses, my current business, past successes and failures. I've failed as much as I've succeeded, probably more, well, actually way more than I've succeeded, but I've had some good wins through the years as well. And I'm going to give you like a behind the scenes backstage pass to everything, to showing you I've got multiple 7-figure businesses right now. And I own a golf course. I operate, both sides of the country and all this stuff. And this newsletter is going to be like the inner workings of what I'm experiencing and what you can learn from it if you care to. So what is infinite ROI, and why should I care? So the concept here, where I came up with this idea a few years ago, it's actually the name of one of my companies, is that when you create something, especially like an information product, there's other things that you can create that do this too, but information is a really easy one to understand. If you create an information product and it sells and it's worthy and it's something that people want, then you can actually see the bit of work that you did years earlier trending, the return on that work, on the investment of that time and effort, energy and money. You can see the return on that trend to infinity over time. I've got businesses that I created, over a decade ago, that now they were work when I did it. I might have worked for 3 or 6 months to start it, just to get it, get the airplane moving off the ground at all. It took a lot of effort. But then once it's going, now, I spend less than an hour a week on, a few of these businesses, and they are literally $1 million plus businesses and multi-million-dollar businesses. And you can do this. And now, just so you know, there's a lot of talk about passive income. That's not really what this is about, although you can have that. Truly, I think that there's a popular blog about it that I wrote in the newsletter here and all this stuff. And I'm not dissing on the guy, but he's the most unpassive. It started off, well, whatever. Anyways, I don't know that passive income is the right goal. It's like the truth is like I in the late 90s, I did a bunch of real estate deals. I bought the Carlton Sheets course probably in like 96 or so, 95, 96. And I was a sucker that was I don't know if I was a sucker. I was sucked in by the Carlton Sheets mythology late night on some infomercial, and I started buying and flipping houses, and it was going well. At one point I owned 20, it was either 23 or 27 houses. I can't remember. I've got this big box full of all the files still. And it was not like the infomercial, and it was damn sure not passive, or dang sure not passive. I hope that didn't stop this ad from running, but anyways, or I guess this is going to be on the page, so it's not going to be an ad. So anyways, the infinite ROI idea is that it's like, it can be financial, it can be your time, it can be some skill that you developed, it can be all sorts of things. Like, I've written this sales letter, and it's pretty good. It's made, a bunch of sales already of this newsletter. Like, we've already got, like lots of subscribers to this in the first month from just reading this newsletter. And the reason, like I said, I'm doing this video is because you're probably coming from a video ad. So I think it's more congruent to do it this way. But the skill behind it is that I spent a lot of time over the last 20 years learning how to write persuasive sales copy. And I have lots and lots of courses and things that I've taken and spent, tens of thousands of dollars learning how to do it. Now, are my sales letters perfect? No way. But it's a skill that I've developed that's good enough that I can write a good enough sales letter, and sell things with it, so that the return on my investment of building that skill over time trends as well towards infinity. So it's even on skills. I'll give you another example. When I was a kid, this part of the sales letter talks about the lucky break that changed my life. I'm from a small town in South Carolina. Camden actually is the town. It's about 30-40 minutes east of Columbia on Interstate 20 on the way to Myrtle Beach. And the town I was from, the richest people there were like the local service business guys, the doctor, the lawyer, the dentist, etc. And my dad owned a machine shop. And, he was working hard just to keep us, as they say, above the Mendoza line. And he worked really hard to pay for our stuff. Well, one of his buddies, actually, he met him working in a machine shop when they were both working there, before my dad started his own. That guy and his family bought a golf course, and a 9-hole course on one side of town. And so when I was a kid, under 10 years old, my dad started helping them out there run the course. And he would just, after work, he would come out and they would, cut the greens or aerate, or, had all kinds of, pulling stumps up out of the ground with tractors and all these crazy things. And I was always out there. It was an amazing time for a kid in the late 70s, early 80s to be out there doing all this crazy stuff all the time. But the truth is there's no way in the world that I should have ever played golf, right? And what I mean by that is none of the kids in my neighborhood played golf. Most of the kids that grew up in town playing golf were the ones that went to the fancy country club in town, which is like the country club in the town is like a really highly esteemed club in the state of South Carolina. And we couldn't afford to go to be members there, not even a chance. And so at that point, so I should have never played. None of the kids in my neighborhood played. None of my friends played. Nobody, but I was out there playing all the time with these guys, and it was crazy lifestyle. There was like this, two worlds I ended up in high school, where there's one side where it's all this gambling and I'm playing with 50, 40, 30, 40, 50-year-old men for hundreds and thousands of dollars in gambling. And then on the other side, I'm playing high school golf, so it was this crazy thing. But the bottom line of it is that I became a decent golfer, and I got taught by this guy who's like this famous golf teacher who I drove like 40 miles one way, probably 30 miles one way to go get lessons from him in Blythewood. And so he told me, he's like, listen, you got to hit 1,000 balls a day to become great at golf. And so I just did it. And so I became a really good golfer, and that domino caused the next domino to fall. So years later, I'm in Atlanta, going to Georgia Tech, working at a golf course in Roswell part-time, just so I can have some beer money and so that I can have a place to play. And one evening I'm out there by myself. I worked in the cart barn, and I had a nice little side business hustling members for cash. One evening I was out there playing 9 holes by myself, and these two guys joined up with me and played the last 5 or 6 holes with me. And at the end of it, the guy was like, hey, oh, and before I get to that, there's an article in this month's newsletter that'll tell more about my golfing stuff. It's the article that tells about how I made millions of dollars selling Vaseline for $50 a can. It's like right there. I don't know if you can see it, but so back to Atlanta, this guy's like, hey, do you give lessons? And I was like, no, I don't. And partly the reason I didn't want to do it is because the assistant pros at this club were kind of pissy about it. They didn't want you doing it because like that was how they made part of their money. And the guy's like, well, if you did give lessons, how much would you charge? And I had paid Mr. Bennett $50 a lesson when I was going to him. So I was like, $50. And he hands me $500. And he's like, here's for the first 10. Can we have one right now? Can we get started? And I was like, what? Just like holy, what just happened here? So I was like, all right, I'm not going to turn down $500 cash in my hand as a kid, and so I was like, okay. So I went and gave him a lesson, found out that he was a stockbroker. He was young. He's like 28 years old, cocky guy, super rich in my world. Had a black 911 convertible, had a red Acura NSX, which is like this really cool car back then. It was like twin turbos and everything. He wrecked it, by the way. Had a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet, like the one in the movie Boiler Room. All this stuff, right? And he just had money coming out of every orifice. We were playing golf one day, and his bag fell off the cart. One of the guys unhooked it as a joke, and bag fell off the cart, and I put it back on, and a wad of cash fell out of his bag. And I was like, dude, he's like, oh, I've been looking for that, and throws it right back in his golf bag. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, this is the craziest thing ever. So after we've been going for a while, he decides that he wants me to be like, so this place that we were doing lessons was kind of like a north drive for both of us. And he's like, hey, he goes, I'll get us both a membership to a golf club downtown. Cause he was working at Bear Stearns and I was living downtown by Georgia Tech. And so he bought us both a membership. So we were driving. I mean, it's like, nothing for him to, spend probably, I don't know what it was, maybe 20 grand just for convenience. So we don't have to drive all the way up, And so we're driving one day in the car in his Porsche to the golf course. And he's like, hey, you want to see something cool? And I was like, sure. And, and by the way, I do want to tell you this one piece. So I was still working at the golf course, and one of the guys there, this guy, Keith, one of the assistant pros, like found out that I was giving this guy lessons, and he was so pissed. He was livid. And he made my life a living hell at that golf course for the next couple of months while in this interim stage. The crazy part is he literally, like every bad job that you can have, like cleaning the ball washer where you wash the range balls, that thing, I threw up multiple times trying to clean that nasty mother scratcher. So anyways, so we're in the car and Jim's like, hey, you want to see something cool? And I was like, yeah, of course. And he hands me an envelope and I open it up, and there's a check in it for $169,000 and some whatever, and I was like, what, what is this? What the heck? What is this? And he's like, it's my paycheck. And I was like, what? He goes, I had a good year this month. And I was just like looking at him. He goes, but I have a good year every month. and that's like his joke. And I was just, I'm just sitting there, it's one of those things where it's like just sinking in to me. Like, am I like, like he had been on me for a while to like come work for him instead of working at the golf course and being an engineer, which is what I was in school for. And I was like, not really that interested, for one reason, because I didn't want to work in like fluorescent lighting kind of situation. And two, I sort of still held on to a little bit the dream that I might make it on the PGA Tour or something, or work in golf. So once he shows me that, though, I was like, all right, you got me. I'll do it. And on the sales letter, I say, okay, Mr. Gecko, you got me. It's a allusion to the movie Wall Street, when Bud Fox is in the back with Gordon Gecko, and he's wanting him to give him, join the team to give him insider information and all this stuff. Anyways, so I went to work with this guy. It wasn't at Bear Stearns. It was actually for a few months before Bear Stearns, that I was with this guy, and then I ended up at Bear Stearns, and I'll tell that story in another newsletter. But this guy got me started being a stockbroker, and then I ended up a few months later at Bear Stearns. But what's crazy is that the Bear Stearns thing changed my life, and I'm kind of giving you the dominoes of infinite ROI here. It's like, I started working with guys. Like, my biggest world belief at the time that I started this whole thing was that $150,000 a year was a lot of money. That was what the richest people I knew growing up were making. They weren't like, that was like my friends at the country club, their dads were making 150 grand a year. So it was like, that was big money. And I started working with all these guys. All of them, every one of them, made more in a month than anybody had ever seen in my hometown was making in a year. And so it just was like one of these mind-blowing things to see it. And like on a Friday afternoon, they would just decide, hey, let's all go out and buy Land Rovers. Like, this is when the Land Rover Defender 90 came out. And so these guys were like, hey, let's go buy Land Rovers. And just on a Friday afternoon, just go out and buy 3 cars. It was just a different world, and so, but then at the same time, what was happening at night, and I, I'm like juggling school and work. And then at night, the internet's happening, and it's like, holy cow, this is the craziest thing ever, that the internet is starting. I'm a nerd at heart in a lot of ways, but I'm in this sales job that's teaching me how to sell. I've got this analytical mind and learning how to sell and all this sort of stuff. And I'm talking to these entrepreneurs, like our clients were all these small entrepreneurs around the country who are telling me that I'm not going to ever, they're like, you're going to, like you're not controlling your own future working there. You need to have your own business and all this sort of stuff. And we were in an elevator one day, going to eat lunch, and one of the guys is like, he goes, if we're making so much money, how come we're chasing them because they got all the cheese or something like that, and it just like these weird things. But ultimately the internet started happening, and it's just blowing my mind. I'm at night, I'm like learning how to, like, just finding websites and all this cool stuff. And then I start learning how to build websites, because once you, I wanted to deconstruct it and learn how to do it and all this sort of stuff. And it's crazy because it was like this perfect storm of different things, like changing my perspective, putting me in touch with all these different people. I worked really hard. I mean, I made 100 contacts every day for 5 years, all this sort of stuff. And then at the end of 96, like we were taking all these companies public, you know, like Netscape and all these companies. And I'd met some of these guys and I'm like, these guys are not, super, some of them were sharp, but some of them weren't. But ultimately at the end of 96, I quit Bear Stearns for a couple of reasons, but one of the biggest ones and one of the things that happened because of it is I started my first internet company. And through the years, I've done all sorts of businesses, from service businesses like agencies and building websites and intranets and all this crazy stuff, selling leads to like everybody, lawyers, mortgage brokers. I got leads for some big companies. I'll tell all this stuff in different newsletters, but selling e-commerce, airsoft guns. I was one of the biggest airsoft gun sellers, auto parts, all sorts of crazy stuff, go-karts, all this stuff. And I had an SEO agency back in the day with Swiss Army as a client, and Patagonia and Chadwick's of Boston and all these other Insure.com, all these different clients. Sold a lot of stuff, and a lot of those things, like several things that I've built over the years, are still selling. I still have the businesses. Others, like I helped a buddy of mine recently take his drug rehab from low 8 figures to low 9 figures in a couple of years. I'm going to write about that probably in one of the newsletters. This is like a 22-year ride since I quit Bear Stearns. And ultimately, over those years, I've sold well over 600,000. I quit counting at 600,000 units of my own information products, a lot of other stuff. I've got a Vaseline product that I've sold millions of dollars worth of, collected over 3 million leads. I had 2 accounts on this CRM that were maxed out. They would max out at 1.5 million, and I had to have 2 accounts. And I got a great story of how I decided one night after having a few drinks to just email all 3 million people, and got shut down the next day, which is great. I've spent $50 million plus on AdWords for myself and clients, spent over 10 million on Facebook in the last few years, mostly for my clients, but also a little bit for myself, probably, I don't know, a few, 300, 400, 500,000 for myself. I bought clicks before there was an AdWords. The first one was Go-To, and then there was Overture. Like a buddy of mine was like, so I was one of the spammers early on and doing all that stuff. And I'll tell some of those stories, but I was spamming Hotbot and Alta Vista and all these old search engines to try to get my sites up there. And then a buddy is like, hey, there's this place called Go-To, and you can pay to be at the top. It wasn't pay-per-click then. It was just paying for placement at the top for CPM bidding. And then Overture bought Go-To, and Yahoo bought Overture, and then Google a couple years later, probably about a year and a half later, started AdWords. And then it was like, again, it was, sort of like seeing the stuff at Bear Stearns. But crazy part is, through those years, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen people come and go in the business. A lot of people that were like the biggest guy in the world online as far as a marketing guru. And that guy is, I don't know where they are now. I've got, and I do know where some of them are. Hey, Jenna, will you hand me that box of the Corey Rudel tapes there, or DVDs or CDs? No, it's down under lift the book right here. Yeah, that'll work. Just that one. So I've got I bought the Corey Rudel stuff back before he was dead, before he died. And, I've got my first event I went to was back in 97. I've been to all kind of events, Dan Kennedy, all this stuff and everything. So it's crazy that 22 years later, I'm still here, still going. And a bunch of my buddies were like, hey, you should write a newsletter about this or do something. They told me to do a podcast, but I haven't gotten onto that yet. But ultimately the cool thing about it is that I still am like a kid in a candy store. I still test things. I'm running like how many tests right now? Like 5 different things that we're like different offers and different crazy things that we're testing right now in different markets. It's just the funnest, most amazing business in the world. And, I love it. And so, and another cool thing is I now own White Pines, the golf course that I grew up playing as a kid. And, it's a funny story. Now it's like 13 years ago or so, after I had done the stockbroker thing and my businesses were doing great, I moved into a golf neighborhood in North Atlanta, and I bought a house on the 4th hole of the golf course and joined the club. And one morning I was going in the pro shop to play golf with my buddy Scott and Steve and another guy. And I walk in and look behind the counter, and it's the guy, Keith, the guy that was my boss, was the assistant pro at that other club, that had been just a complete dick to me for about 2 or 3 months at that point. And, back in the day, and it was just crazy. And what's funny is he looked at me and kind of cocked his head a little bit, and then literally commenced to kissing my ass, which was like the best feeling on earth. That guy probably hated my guts, but had to kiss my butt. So anyways, so the point is that all that story is that the ROI comes from the fact that I was a great golfer, and that I had spent the years, hitting those balls and practicing and all those sort of things. And who knows if I would have ever, come down a different path. I certainly don't think I would have, because how would I have ever come in contact with a stockbroker like that and all that sort of stuff? So I don't know if the ROI on hitting 1,000 balls a day for 3.5 years of golf is infinite, but it's definitely as good as it would have been if I had tried to play golf on the tour, right? And so then what's interesting is, like, I have this kind of an engineer's mind. That's kind of my nature. But then I also have learned sales, because one of the things we had to do at Bear Stearns was like make 100 contacts every day, which meant dialing many times close to 1,000 Dun & Bradstreet cards every day. And I've got some crazy stories about that, as you can imagine. But ultimately, when you combine the sales stuff I learned at Bear Stearns with the natural inclination of being kind of a tinkerer and an engineer type, there's a real interesting combo there. And then you combine both of those with direct response marketing, which is what I've been studying for the last 20 years, from guys like Dan Kennedy and Gary Halbert and Joe Carbo and all these like marketing legend guys. It's like this really powerful full combo. And that's where I come up with this idea of infinite ROI on your skills and the things that you learn. And there's a great book called it's like Finite and Infinite Games. And the concept is this idea of an infinite game. The point of it isn't to win, it's just to keep being able to keep playing the game. And along those lines, for me, it's like doing interesting stuff like this newsletter is part of the game, is part of the fun and everything. And telling these stories, I've got a buddy, Rob Cosberg, and we're out playing golf every week. We play golf every Thursday, and it's like I just got all these things over these last 20 something years. He's like, man, that's a new story I never heard before, and he and I have been playing golf for 20 years together, and so whatever. But the point is that, like, I've worked and studied, to develop these skills, and the idea of having this sort of infinite ROI on these skills is really powerful. The reason that I'm actually doing this letter is because as of today, October 7th, there was just a message that he might pull through, and I hope he does. And I hope that it was actually some sort of marketing ploy, which would be the greatest, the worst and greatest thing ever at the same time, right? Which is great, is that Dan Kennedy has been in really bad health, but I've been a student of his for years. Like the manual that Jenna just pulled off of the box to show the Corey Riddle thing is from the 2000 info product summit. And so I've been a student of his for a long time. I was never in his Titanium Mastermind or any of those things. I was in StomperNet and some other things, but never did his Titanium Mastermind at that point, because when I was going to some of those things, I wasn't really sure which direction I was going to go with the business. But Dan's like he's the godfather of all this stuff, as they say in the movie, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" the paterfamilias, and so with him sort of in limbo and everything, I've been thinking, I've been urged many times to write a newsletter like Dan's, and I thought, and I've always thought, well, I won't make enough money off of it, or there won't be enough interest or whatever. And I just decided, and I've always held off, there's a big commitment to it, right? And I don't want it to be half-assed or not very good. And I just recently decided to give it a shot and go for it. And so that brings me to this section where it's like, have you made your decision for Christ? And the reason I put that, I'm not trying to convert you into a religion of any sort other than the infinite ROI religion, is one of my favorite scenes from any movie of all times is the movie Glenn Ross. And it's when Alec Baldwin's character comes downtown on a mission of mercy from Mitch and Murray. And he's going to tell the guys about the new sales contest. And he's like, you guys, like they're this is awesome scene. And Jack Lemmon is back there getting coffee. He's like, put the coffee down and all this sort of stuff. And he says, I'm here to tell you about the new sales contest. And he's like, first place is a Cadillac Eldorado. And he goes, second place, and he holds it up. He's like, set of steak knives. Third place is you're fired. And they all look up. He's like, oh, have I got your attention now? And then he goes through it and he talks about, he flips the board and he talks about, ABC always be closing. And then he talks about AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. And it's like, attention, do I have your attention? Interest, are you interested? I know you are, because it's fuck or walk. You close or you hit the bricks. Decision, have you made your decision for Christ? And then action, they're sitting out there waiting you to give you your money. Are you going to take it? Are you man enough to take it? And it's just this really powerful scene. But the point of it was that he was trying to get them to commit, right, to the sale, and to believe that they're like, if they're not believing in what they're selling, it's never going to work, and all this sort of stuff. And they're blaming it on the leads and everything. And then he holds up the Glengarry leads and he's like, you cannot have them, because giving them to you would be like throwing them away. And so anyways, so the point of all that is that I've decided the same way to commit to this letter. I mean, writing 15 pages of content is not something that's very easy to do in any situation, but especially if you're going to like really care about it and make it awesome, right? So, and, sharing information that I've never shared with anybody, telling stories I've never told, secrets about different ways I've done business that I've never revealed, and especially not going to reveal them online so that people can just put them on some crappy torrent site or any of that. So just so you know, there's not going to be a digital version of this. There's no digital, like Jenna was just asking me about this today. We've had half dozen of our people that are paying for it asking for a digital version. There's not a digital version. This is good. This is the only way to get this, is in this newsletter. And the reason why, I mean, I guess somebody could take pictures of it and turn it into a PDF or something, maybe, I don't know, but like who would want to do all that work? But ultimately this is like the real thing, and I don't want all this stuff all over the internet. I only want the people that are paying for it. But like I'm going to talk about like what it was like to have the first Google slap back in 2006, 2010, then affiliate slap, when some guys who have some big softwares today that everybody builds their funnels with, probably were like, I know, whatever. Anyways, so then affiliate slap in 2010, SEO updates that happened all through the early 2000 teens, and what's happening right now with Facebook. It's like Cambridge Analytica and all that stuff, and why you're probably getting your account shut down and personal bans and all that sort of stuff. And talk about the principles, tactics, and all this stuff. And, it's like different ideas. Like most of my businesses have been outside of this world of advice in the marketing space. I've built big businesses in the other world selling to people who are not looking for marketing advice. And I can explain why those are probably, everybody, it's funny, as soon as everybody has a little bit of success with something, the first thing they jump in and do is try to give everybody advice. And that's how you have all these 25-year-old people selling advice on everything because they just had success in the last year or two or whatever. And they know everything, and it's like, dude, I still, after 22 years, don't know everything. But I do know how to sell a few things online. I do know how to avoid some mistakes. I still make a lot, but I got a bunch of screw ups and ugly things, mistakes that I've made, stupid mistakes. I mean, like I have one mistake that I made that cost me, maybe, like, in a perfect world scenario, $100 million. I mean, like, lose your mind mistakes. I mean, I like that story still, like, kind of hurts to even think about. And, but it's real. I mean, it's a real thing. And it's like, I bought a domain that I couldn't monetize, and I had it at the perfect time. I was like right at the tipping point of this big thing that was happening. And a guy who I was competing with in the thing sold his website for $100 million. And I was literally right beside him. I mean, like I can't even, whatever. So anyways, so I'm going to tell that story in the newsletter. And so anyways, so at this point, this video is getting way longer than I meant for it to be. But, what's it going to cost me? The truth is it should cost you nothing. You should be able to you should be making tons and tons and tons of profit off of the information in this every single month. You should be avoiding mistakes that I make that I've made from what you read and hear, all this stuff. Now, I do charge you for the newsletter. It's not free, but the cost should be nothing. It's the newsletter is $29.95 a month. That's printed and shipped to you anywhere on planet Earth. It's $29.95 per month. The truth is, if you get this newsletter and you're not making multiples of that from it, then hit me up and I'll refund your money. I mean, it is that simple, because this is the real stuff. I'm not like a 24-year-old who's just making this shit up. I've really lived it the hard way, the good ways. I mean, it's like I've gone all the way from Camden, South Carolina to Atlanta, Georgia, North Atlanta or whatever. And now I live in lovely Newport Beach, California. So it's been good to me. But ultimately, there's a lot of mistakes I've made too. And people have asked, like, giving it away free and why don't you, which is part of the reason I haven't wanted to do a podcast. Also because I think podcasts are like, they're all kind of the same right now. So I don't really know exactly what I would do. I wouldn't want it to be just sort of half-assed interview show like everybody else does. Although I do, whatever. Anyways, I wouldn't give this away for free. And I'm going to talk about this actually in the next newsletter, but it is offensive to me that people expect someone who has spent a career amassing this information and knowledge, that someone expects you to just give it away. I mean, that's like the socialist Bernie Sanders. It's like this. It's like this entitlement. Like, oh, you've worked your whole life to learn these lessons. Why don't you just give them to me? There's a million reasons why it's wrong, but not the least of which is, if it's not worth $30 for you to learn from a guy who's done tens of millions of dollars in sales of his own products online and hundreds of millions of dollars in sales of other people's products, then you don't get it, and then lastly, you know, the interesting thing is, you probably don't know who I am. You've never heard of me before. And partly because I don't sell in this space. I haven't needed to sell in this space. I still don't need to sell in this space. But you're taking a risk on me with this $30. It's the risk of what it would cost to feed a family at McDonald's for lunch, probably, right? And I know that subscription is harder to sell than if it was just a one-off product, although you can cancel at any time, right? That's the reason that free plus shipping works so well. I could set this up as a $7.95. I'll give it to you for free. I can tell you, it cost me like $3.50 to ship it to you in the United States. It cost me like $6 to ship it anywhere else in the world, because it's a newsletter, not a box. So I could do a $7.95 free plus shipping and have a buttload of upsells and downsells and all that sort of stuff. I'd rather just sell you the newsletter and make it awesome, right? And ultimately, the one thing I'm willing to do to get you sort of off of the schneid, as they say, to pull the trigger and invest in this, is I just recently did an event here in Newport Beach at our offices here, and had about a dozen of our private clients come in. And these are people that pay us tens of thousands of dollars a year. And we recorded a live training that I did with them over the course of 2 days, where we worked on clarity in their business, like getting clear on the purpose of your business, what your goals are for your business, your market that you're selling to, your message that you are putting out into the marketplace, the offer. We talked about the KPIs that you need to track, the roles that you need in your company, the skill gaps that you probably have, all these different things. And it was 2 days of live training. And literally the only way to be there is if you're paying us thousands of dollars every month. And we had a client fly in all the way from Australia to attend it, which is pretty far from Newport Beach. And I'll give you the recordings to the workshop as a bonus if you subscribe and take a chance on me with this $30 a month newsletter today. So with the Infinite ROI letter, I talk about traffic, conversion, marketing ideas, opinions, crazy stuff. One of the things I have in here is the $1 million idea of the month, things that I think of and research, and that there's a market there for, but I don't have time to do. And last ones right there. That's it right there. So all this crazy stuff. Like I said, there's no upsells or downsells in this version. This is it. Like if you don't buy this, if you buy this, I'm not going to try to sell you into my thing that like this. It's so funny, after you buy so many times, they're like, well, thanks for buying the thing, but it's really not complete unless you get this. That's not That's not what's going to happen after this. It's going to say, thank you for buying. We'll get this in the mail to you, and you should look for it within 7 days. That's how it works, right? So ultimately, if you want the insight and wisdom and crazy stories and ideas from somebody who has legitimately been doing this business for longer than a lot of the other gurus have, well, and maybe not longer than they've been alive, but they were definitely still in kindergarten or diapers when I started. So love to have you on board. Some of the biggest names, famous people that I don't really want to out them, but they've already subscribed, and there are clients in our little agency that we run. Like we are sort of behind the scenes of a lot of the big guys out there. So anyways, that's it. And subscribed, get the Infinite ROI marketing letter now, and look forward to talking to you some point. See ya. Bye.